Welcome to story number 7 from Baseball Boobs and the Babe the Stinky Guy. There are a lot of ways to lose a $2,300 sale. Bad pricing, poor customer service, a weak economy, a competitor across town. But as far as I know, Debbie and I may be the only business owners who ever lost one because a customer smelled too bad. Now, before somebody gets offended, let me tell you this story is absolutely true. During the 3 decades Debbie and I owned Nick's Sports Cards in Dallas, we learned that baseball cards were predictable. Customers were not. Most folks who walked through our front door were wonderful people. Some became lifelong friends. A few became legends. And one became famous for a smell that could clear a room faster than a fire alarm. We called him the Stinky Guy. Not because we were being mean. Because honestly, we couldn't remember his real name. But we never forgot the smell. And neither did anybody else. The Stinky Guy was a regular customer. Every time he pulled into the parking lot, Debbie and I would exchange that same look. You know the look. The one married couples develop after years together. The look that says, brace yourself. The smell was difficult to describe. Imagine an outhouse door on a tuna boat in August. That's about as close as I can come. What made things even more interesting was his appearance. You never knew exactly what version of the Stinky Guy was going to show up. Sometimes his shirt was inside out. Sometimes his pants were backward. Sometimes both. One afternoon, he pulled into our parking lot and parked his car halfway over the curb at an angle that suggested parking was more of a suggestion than a rule. He climbed out. Backward pants. Crooked shirt. Business as usual. Inside the store, one of our best customers, Sammy, was examining a baseball card priced at $2,300. Back then, that was serious money. I was already thinking about the sale. Then the front door opened. The Stinky Guy walked in. Sammy took one sniff. He quietly set the card down and headed straight for the door. No goodbyes. No explanation. Just gone. A few minutes later, the phone rang. It was Sammy. I said, "Where'd you go?" He said, "Nick, I want the card." I said, "Good. Come buy it." He replied, "I can't stay in there with that guy." Now that's not something they teach in business school. Nobody prepares you for losing sales because of atmospheric conditions. About the time I hung up, another customer walked in. He took 2 steps, stopped, sniffed, turned around and left. The entire visit lasted about 8 seconds. At that point, I started wondering how much money was leaving the store every time the Stinky Guy arrived. It was becoming impossible to ignore. So I decided to have one of the most uncomfortable conversations a person can have. I pulled him aside and carefully explained that his body odor was affecting customers and hurting business. To my surprise, he wasn't offended. In fact, he admitted other people had mentioned it. Even his sister. And his sister was a doctor. He said he didn't know why he smelled so bad. That led me to ask one of the most awkward questions I've ever asked another grown man. I took a deep breath, as deep a breath as the circumstances allowed. And I asked, "Do you shower?" The room went silent. He didn't answer, didn't react, didn't get angry. He simply changed the subject and started talking about baseball cards, which, if we're being honest, may have answered the question. Months passed before we saw him again. Then one afternoon, he walked into the store carrying several factory baseball sets he wanted to sell. Immediately, I noticed something different. His clothes were on correctly. His hair looked combed. And most importantly, the smell wasn't nearly as bad. Now, I wouldn't say he smelled like roses. Let's not get carried away. But he had definitely moved from emergency evacuation status to acceptable public appearance. Customers stayed in the store. Nobody fled. Nobody called from the parking lot. And for the first time, the visit felt almost normal, almost. I never found out exactly what changed. Maybe he started showering. Maybe his doctor sister staged an intervention. Maybe somebody bought him a lifetime supply of soap. I honestly don't know. But I do know this. Sometimes the most uncomfortable conversations are the ones that need to happen. Avoiding them doesn't make the problem disappear. And in this case, avoiding it costs at least one $2,300 sale. The Stinky Guy eventually faded away, as so many customers do. But 30 years later, Debbie and I still remember him. Because some customers leave an impression. And some leave an odor. Now, speaking of unforgettable encounters. In our next story, you'll learn that my sweet, kind, patient wife, Debbie, isn't always sweet, kind, and patient. Because one afternoon, a woman pushed her just a little too far. And for a brief moment, Debbie almost kicked her ass. That's story number 8.